So every time you ask an AI to write an email for you, or summarize a document, or generate an image somewhere in the world, a physical drop of fresh drinking water literally evaporates to cool the machine that just answered you.
Yeah, it's wild how well the digital world hides its physical footprint. Like,
Yeah.
we're so conditioned to view our online lives as completely separate from, heavy, messy physical realities.
Like concrete and copper wire.
Exactly. Heavy machinery. We just tap a screen and it feels weightless.
Like magic. But the cloud isn't actually in the sky. I mean, the cloud is millions of pounds of metal and silicon sitting in these massive, heavily guarded warehouses, and we're really starting to see that weightless illusion crack.
Oh, absolutely.
So welcome to the custom-tailored deep dive. Our mission today is to step entirely away from the daily tech hype cycle. We're digging into this fascinating set of analytical reports that track a massive structural shift in global events, specifically looking at what happened between week 25 and week 26 of 2026.
Right. And the core theme across all these documents is that AI has essentially ceased to be just an information industry issue. It has slammed headfirst into the physical world.
Yeah, it really has. And I want to set the tone here right from the jump. We are not here to hype up some AI utopia where robots fix everything.
Yeah.
And we're not doing the apocalyptic doom-mongering thing either.
No, definitely not. We're just looking at the structural realities. The reports use these two really helpful concepts, membrane pressure and speed mismatch.
Yes, those two phrases come up constantly. So let's break that down. To really grasp what shifted in week 26, we have to look at the week before, right?
Yeah, in week 25, the friction caused by AI was almost completely institutional. Like, the software and the money were moving at breakneck speed, but human institutions were moving at their normal, historically slow pace.
Right, I remember that. The friction was more abstract. It was parents worrying about kids writing essays with ChatGPT or HR scrambling to draft chatbot policies.
Exactly. The analysts called that a quiet wear and tear. It was organizational stress. But human institutions have elasticity, right? You can change a corporate policy in a few days if you absolutely have to.
Yeah, you just send out an email.
Right. But week 26 is where that friction stopped being abstract and became deeply physical.
It pierced the digital veil. It stopped pressuring just corporate policies and started pressuring the physical membranes of the real world.
And when we say membrane here, think of it as the physical buffer of a system. A local power grid has a maximum capacity, that's a membrane. A city's reservoir holds a finite amount of water.
Right, another membrane.
Yeah. And in week 26, the sheer computing power required by these new models hit those physical limits simultaneously all over the world.
It's like last week we were worried if the new company software was going to, crash our laptops. But this week we realized the software requires so much sheer electricity that just turning it on might blow out the town's electrical substation.
That's a great way to put it. The conversation went from can HR adapt to can the transformer physically handle the voltage without catching fire?
Wow. And for you listening, think about how tech news is usually pitched to you. It's about features, right? A faster model, a smarter assistant. But this framework forces a totally different perspective. Every time AI gets smarter, the infrastructure gets heavier and hotter.
Very hot. Which brings us to the most immediate constraint in the source's electricity.
Right. Let's talk about the power grids.
So market behavior in the data center space completely inverted in week 26. Before, the bottleneck was just getting the chips, the GPUs. But now, investors are aggressively acquiring actual power generation assets.
Wait, they're buying power plants.
They're buying power plants and even the development companies that build the power plants.
That is crazy. I was looking at the Reuters projection from our source stack, and the numbers are they're really hard to wrap your head around. They project North American data center power demand is going to double, jumping from 31 gigawatts in 2025 to 66 gigawatts in 2027.
Yeah, adding 35 gigawatts of continuous power demand to the grid in a 2-year window is a monumental engineering challenge. I mean, to put that in context, a large nuclear reactor generates maybe 1 gigawatt.
Oh, wow. So the industry is basically demanding 35 new nuclear reactors worth of energy in 24 months.
Exactly.
How does that not just end in total gridlock? I mean, tech moves in days, but infrastructure takes years.
Well, that is the absolute core of the speed mismatch we mentioned. A software company can deploy a new model to millions of users over a weekend. The demand spike is instantaneous.
But you can't just 3D print a power plant.
You really can't. You have to acquire land. You have to do years of environmental impact studies, secure permits, order these custom-built high-voltage transformers, which, by the way, have wait times of several years right now,
Yikes.
and then physically lay miles of transmission lines. The digital world is operating in milliseconds, but the physical world operates in decades.
So we can't just look at software companies to understand AI anymore. Big tech is basically being forced to become the utility industry.
They have to, just to guarantee their machines can turn on. The constraint isn't the code anymore. It's whether they can legally and physically pull enough current from the wall without browning out the neighborhood.
And if we follow those transmission lines, they lead us straight into cities,
Right.
the places where power is consumed most densely. And if AI needs unprecedented power and unprecedented water to cool the machines, the cities are sitting on those resources.
Right. And in the Week 26 reports show a really fascinating shift in how cities are handling this. They're waking up.
They're not just passively letting tech companies build anymore.
They're becoming highly active rulemakers. We saw 40 mayors from major global hubs, places like London, Melbourne, Phoenix. They banded together to draft new frameworks to manage this heavy regional burden.
Yeah, the localized projections are alarming. In Melbourne, they're looking at models showing that by 2040, data centers alone could use up to 20% of the city's entire electricity supply.
And 4% of its drinking water.
That drinking water stat stopped me in my tracks. Like, why does a computer need drinking water? Can't they just pump seawater or, I don't know, recycled gray water through the cooling pipes?
You would think so, but it comes down to the mechanics of evaporative cooling. That's the most common way they pull heat away from server farms. They run water through cooling towers, it absorbs heat, and evaporates.
Okay, makes sense.
But if you use gray water or seawater, the high mineral content and impurities leave behind scale and deposits when the water evaporates.
Oh, like the calcium buildup on a shower head.
Exactly like that, except inside millions of dollars worth of delicate cooling equipment. That buildup acts as an insulator, destroys the cooling efficiency, and eventually ruins the hardware. So they require highly purified, potable water, the exact same water the local population relies on to drink.
Wow. Okay, I see the mechanical constraint, but let me put on my mayor hat for a second. If a tech giant wants to drop a $2 billion facility in my district bringing jobs, massive property tax revenue, I'm taking that deal. Are mayors actually turning that away?
Well, they aren't rejecting the technology or the investment outright. What we're seeing is the city's operating system demanding that the terms of engagement be clearly defined. They're establishing connection conditions.
So basically a prenup with big tech before letting them tap the grid.
A very strict prenup. Because the mayors are forced to ask really tough questions. Like, if the local grid hits max capacity on a Tuesday in August, who gets throttled?
Do the servers power down, or do the local schools lose air conditioning?
Exactly. Or if there's a severe drought, whose water rights take priority. They're trying to measure how much of the financial benefit stays local versus how much their physical resources are permanently consumed by a global corporation.
It's not a blanket no. It's, if you build here, you operate within the limits of our physical membrane.
Right. And you don't break it.
And speaking of breaking membranes, this transition from the localized waste heat of a server farm to broader environmental heat, that was another major focus in the Week 26 reports. Because the city's membrane isn't just dealing with AI, it's dealing with the climate.
Yeah. Europe was struck by a severe, record-breaking heat wave during this time.
France alone reported over 1,000 excess deaths. And the analytical framework here treats this not just as a weather event, but as profound stress test for the living membrane of the city.
It tests the absolute limits of a region's cooling capacity. Hospitals get overrun, asphalt buckles, public transit has to slow down so the tracks don't warp.
But the detail that really connected the dots for me was about the nuclear power plants.
Oh yeah, the nuclear cooling systems are a perfect illustration of membrane pressure.
Because during this heat wave, right when millions of people are cranking their AC and demanding max electricity, the nuclear plants actually had to reduce their power output.
Yeah, because they rely on drawing massive amounts of water from local rivers to cool the reactors, and then they discharge that water back into the river at a slightly higher temperature.
But the river water was already so warm from the heat wave that discharging warmer water back into it would have literally boiled the local ecosystem alive.
Right, so environmental regulations forced them to dial back production at the exact moment power was needed most.
The convergence there is just wild. A city's physical membrane, the grid, the water, the temperature buffer, it's a finite resource. And you have this massive AI infrastructure demanding electricity and purified water, while simultaneously, climate-driven heat waves are demanding electricity and water just to keep humans alive.
They're entirely different demands, but they're pulling from the exact same limited physical buffer.
It's kind of like taking your smartphone out to the beach, setting it in the direct summer sun, and deciding that right then is the perfect moment to render a massive 4K video.
That's a great analogy.
It's not just the editing app that's working hard. The entire device is overheating. The battery drains, it's hot to the touch, the screen dims to save power. In this model, the city is the smartphone.
Yeah, the city's operating system has to manage the thermal and electrical load, prioritizing survival over performance. Week 26 really showed that the margin for error is wearing incredibly thin.
Okay, so we've established the hard physical limits, the transformer wait times, evaporative cooling, hot river water. But there is another massive system at play here that seems totally decoupled from those physical realities.
The financial world.
Right, the financial world. And this is where the speed mismatch goes from being an engineering headache to a systemic vulnerability.
The Bank for International Settlements, the BIS, which is basically the central bank for central banks, they issued a very pointed warning this week.
They link three things you generally do not want to see in the same sentence: high global debt, deep financial fragility, and the sustainability of the AI investment boom.
Right, because the financial operating system, venture capital, equity markets, it has the ability to price in the future revenues of AI almost instantaneously. A firm announces a breakthrough, and billions of dollars in market cap are generated in seconds.
Because on a financial spreadsheet, growth has zero friction. It's just numbers going up.
Exactly. The financial OS operates at the speed of light. But the physical OS, pouring concrete for a dam, laying transmission lines, doing community board meetings for permits, it doesn't care what the stock price is. It cannot expand at market speed.
So the financial market is essentially writing massive checks that the physical power grid is just fundamentally incapable of cashing.
And that tension is exactly what prompted the BIS warning. The AI boom is a massive growth narrative drawing in trillions of dollars, but the market expects a return on that capital quickly, and the physical infrastructure takes a decade to build.
It creates a point of acute financial fragility.
Yes, the market has priced in a future that assumes the physical world will magically bend to accommodate it.
But as the mayors and the power grids are showing us, the physical world doesn't bend. It just puts on the brakes.
The systemic risk isn't that AI technology fails to progress. The risk is that financial expectations have totally detached from the physical realities of what is structurally possible to build in the next 3 to 5 years.
Let's trace this capital even further upstream. Because if financial markets are throwing billions into building this physical infrastructure, it all has to be constructed out of raw materials. Which brings us to the deepest layer of this whole equation: the Earth itself.
The upstream supply chain. Whether you're building AI data centers, EVs, or defense systems, all of it funnels down to a bottleneck of critical minerals.
Right. The reports highlight some specific geopolitical movements here. We see the Democratic Republic of Congo actively managing its vast reserves of cobalt, which is non-negotiable for high-capacity batteries. We also see China tightening export controls on rare earth elements.
And this isn't about passing judgment on foreign policy. It's just observing the structural reality. The cloud has a physical address, and it's grounded in global resource strategies.
It reminds us that the digital economy is tethered to very specific mining operations in very specific geographies. But to see how all these layers, finance, resources, local constraints, to see how they collide in one place, the analysts focused heavily on Japan during week 26.
Yeah, Blackstone announced a plan to invest $30 billion into Japanese AI data centers. And at the exact same time, the Japanese yen dropped significantly, hitting the 161 level against the dollar.
Now, a surface-level economic reading would say, hey, this is great for Japan, foreign direct investment is coming in, and the weak currency makes it cheaper for American firms to build there. But applying the membrane framework reveals a much more complicated picture.
For Japan, this isn't just a simple economic win. It is a massive structural pressure test.
It connects every vulnerability we've laid out today.
It really does. You have this enormous influx of foreign capital rushing in to take advantage of the weak yen, but that capital isn't just sitting in a bank. It's being deployed to build hyper-dense physical infrastructure that will demand immense local resources.
Right, Blackstone's dollars might stretch further because of the exchange rate, but the electricity required to run those servers isn't any cheaper. The purified water isn't any more abundant.
And Japan is an island nation with very specific constraints. They have to manage local community consent for these massive facilities. They have to navigate strict grid connection limits, balance agricultural water use against tech use, and, crucially for Japan, ensure this new infrastructure doesn't compromise their national disaster resilience.
So when we see a headline about a $30 billion tech investment in a foreign country, our first question shouldn't just be, is this good for the stock market?
No, the framework trains us to ask which specific local membrane, the regional power grid, the municipal water supply, the local community is going to be forced to absorb the physical pressure of that investment.
The financial ledger might balance beautifully, but the physical ledger is the one that actually dictates reality. So we started this deep dive with the illusion of the weightless cloud. But as we've unpacked this shift from week 25 to week 26, we've seen AI entirely leave the realm of pure software. It has collided with high-voltage transformers. It's forcing mayors to act like utility regulators. It's competing with human populations for water during heat waves. And it's influencing global mineral supply chains.
The whole point of looking at these reports is to stop seeing the news as isolated random events, a tech stock surging here, a power grid warning there, a currency fluctuation over there. We can now see them all as interconnected symptoms of this massive speed mismatch between our rapid digital ambitions and our incredibly slow physical realities.
Right. And for you listening, this framework changes how you process the future.
Yeah.
Next time you read a breathless headline about a new AI breakthrough or see a trillion-dollar valuation for a tech giant, you have the tools to look past the screen. You can ask, that's an incredible piece of code, but where is the electricity being generated? Whose reservoir is supplying the cooling water? And what physical sacrifices are being made locally to make that digital magic happen globally?
That's the real question.
But before we go, there's one final unmentioned concept tucked away in the deepest part of these analytical sources that I want to leave you with. The analysts use something called MCP fluid stability models to measure how systems handle stress.
Yeah, the math on those is incredibly dense.
It really is. But it suggests a deeply counterintuitive idea. We normally measure a civilization's success by its growth rate, its speed, or its peak efficiency. But these models argue that true stability is actually measured by a system's fluidity, its ability to absorb a shock, recover, and adapt. The models state that the most dangerous state for a complex system is not a sudden, dramatic, apocalyptic collapse. The most dangerous state is something called chronic depolarization. It's a state where a system is running so hot, so fast, and with so little excess buffer that it never actually breaks down, but it becomes permanently exhausted.
It loses all its fluidity.
Exactly. It becomes hypersensitive to the tiniest disruptions and loses all capacity to adapt to anything new. It's just locked in a state of maximum tension forever. So as we watch this unprecedented boom in AI pull harder and harder on our power grids, our water supplies, and our cities, what if the real risk isn't some sci-fi scenario where the machines take over? What if the real risk is simply that the immense weight of the cloud grinds our physical world into a state of permanent exhaustion, where we have no capacity left to recover? Something to mull over the next time you tap your screen and expect the physical world to instantly respond. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.